Hi, this is Keith Davidson from Albertson & Davidson. In this video, I'm walking you through a sample demand letter that you can use to demand an accounting and to demand financial information from your trustee. It's very important that you put these demands in writing because until you make a written demand, the trustee isn't technically obligated to give you anything. Once you make a demand in writing, then the trustee has 60 days in which to comply. I also want to point out that demanding an accounting is very different from demanding financial information because an accounting is a formal document that the trustee has to prepare. They typically will hire an accountant. It'll cost money to prepare, and it'll give you kind of a full report of everything that's happened in the trust. When you request financial information, you're just requesting copies of things like bank statements or brokerage statements. That's very easy for the trustee to give to you. In theory, if you have a good trustee, they should be able to just give you copies of those documents. And then you can look at them yourself and you can determine if there's anything in there that you think needs more description or that you think might be a problem. But it's not a full report. So an accounting is a little bit harder to do. It takes a little bit more time to prepare, and it's a little bit more of a thorough document. Whereas financial information, it's much easier to provide to a beneficiary. You have to kind of look at it and figure it out on your own to some extent, although you can always go back and ask the trustee questions, but it's not quite the same as an accounting. So even if you're in a position where the trustee says, well, I've only been trustee for a couple months, you're not entitled to an accounting, Mr. Beneficiary, you still have a right to financial information. So you can use the financial request part of this letter as opposed to the accounting request, or you can use both if it's been long enough. Because typically you have to wait 6 months to a year before you're entitled to an accounting. Whereas financial information, you're entitled to that right off the bat at any time. So let's look at this letter and I'll show you how to use it. So we start off, and you should know that all the names in here are fictional, so I just made them up. And we start off by talking about the Richard Richardson Trust. And the stuff that is highlighted is things that you can change. So at the top here, I start off by letting them know, look, I have been retained to represent Bob Jones and Sam Smith. Well, if you're sending this out and you're not a lawyer, you're just sending it out on your own behalf, just delete that sentence. You don't need it. And so I'm saying I'm writing about this trust. Please provide the following information. Number 1, demand for an accounting. So if you want an accounting, this is the demand. You see how simple it is? It literally is just one paragraph, just one long sentence. By this letter, I'm demanding an accounting. We throw in some probate code sections. Those are the sections that entitle you to an accounting. And you can even go to probate code section 1060, and you can see the format of the accounting. The probate code gives the format, how an accounting should look. It's right there in the code. So you can take a look at that right there. You can see there's 2 things I've highlighted here. One is to be filed with the court. You don't always have to have an accounting filed with the court. That, in some cases you want it, in some cases you don't. If you just want an accounting handed to you and you don't want it filed in the court because you don't want to go through all the time and expense of that, you can just say, provide me with an accounting and take out the part with it to be filed with the court. I've also highlighted throughout the letter where it says your client. So from the date your client became trustee, you can just change that to you if you're sending this letter directly to a trustee. And so if the trustee doesn't have a lawyer, or if you don't know who the trustee's lawyer is, that's not a problem. Just send this letter to the trustee and you'll just take out your client and instead you'll just put you, and you'll see that as we go. So the first one is, here's the accounting demand, and that's that. The second one is where I'm going to demand documents. These are financial documents pertaining to the trust. And you can just have this section if you want. You can delete the accounting part and just ask for financial documents, or you can have both of them, depending on what you want to do. And you'll see that the first one right out of the gate is, give us all trust documents. Maybe there's an amendment to this trust that they haven't given you yet. I want all trust documents. I want the wills, even though the wills probably are irrelevant to a trust administration. I still want them. I have a right to see them. And I want the durable powers of attorney. Number 2, I want copies of all financial statements, bank statements, brokerage statements, everything pertaining to the trust. Just give me copies of the statements. Easiest thing in the world. Not hard to do at all. Number 3, and this is really important one, what is your client's plan for making trust distributions? Or if you're sending this to a trustee, what's your plan for making trust distributions? Are you going to give me cash? Are you going to give me real property? Are you going to give me stocks and bonds plus cash? If the trust requires a distribution, which most trusts do at some point, the trustee better have a plan for how they're going to go about doing that. They can't just sit around not doing it. You have to plan something, come up with an idea of how we're going to get this done. So that's a really important section. We also want copies of all listing agreements, appraisals, or offers. Obviously, if somebody's selling real property, we want to know about it. We want to know about any disbursements made to your client for trustees' fees, or to you for trustees' fees if you're sending it to the trustee. What have you paid yourself? We also want copies and ledgers evidencing any services that the trustee has provided to the trust. So you're paying yourself for trustees' fees. What have you been doing to earn those fees? We need to know. And lastly, we have the all tax returns. So we want the estate tax return if there is one, which nowadays you have to have an estate in excess of 11.5 million to even have to file an estate tax return. So maybe that doesn't apply, but who cares? You'll put it in there anyway. If you have one, give it to us. If you don't, fine. And then we also want to see any income tax returns, because trusts do file Form 1041s, trust income tax returns. We need to see copies of those. So this is kind of a quick list of financial information. In some cases, we'll go more in depth. So for example, let's say the trust owns a closely held business, a plumbing business. Well, then we want to see documents showing us what's going on in the plumbing business. What are the accounts? What are its assets? Things like that. So if somebody owns a boat, we want an appraisal of the boat. Has it been sold? If so, for how much? So you can add to this list. This is just kind of the basics, but you can put in more information or request for information if there's particular assets in your case that you want to know about. And it's always better to ask. So if you're not sure whether you should ask or not, just ask. Because the worst that's going to happen is, trustee will say no. But it's better to include it. Now, this number 3 is interesting. So you don't have to have this third section in here, but the reason we include it is just to make sure that the trustee knows what their duties are. And we list 4 very important duties. These aren't all their duties. There's more than this, but these are certainly 4 of the big ones. Number 1, you have a duty to administer the trust as written in the trust instrument. I mean, stands to reason, but a lot of people don't do it. You have a duty to report information when you're asked to do it. You have a duty to provide information even when you're not asked to do it. And you have a duty to deal impartially with the beneficiaries. You can't favor one over the other. We put this section in the letter for 2 reasons. Number 1, we want to make sure the trustee knows their duties. Trustees are supposed to know what their trustee duties are, but not everyone does. So we want to educate them, number 1. Number 2, we want the trustee to know that we know what their duties are. In other words, as a beneficiary, I want the trustee to know, I know my rights. I know what you, Mr. Trustee, should be doing, and I'm keeping an eye on you. And so we want to make sure the trustee understands that. So that's the purpose of this section 3. You don't have to have it. If you don't want it, take it out. But we like to include it. And sometimes we'll go a little bit more in depth on some of these duties if there's a particular duty that we know needs to be addressed. And finally, we conclude. And in the conclusion, you want to fill in a date. So let me know by a certain date whether you intend to comply with this request. And the reason I want to know that is I want to know if I'm going to have to go to court or not. Because if the trustee ignores this letter or just tells you, no, I'm not giving you any of this, okay, that's fine. But then you as a beneficiary have the right to file a petition in probate court and ask the judge to order the trustee to comply. Because as a beneficiary, you do have a right to an accounting and to all of this financial information. We're not asking for anything that's unreasonable. But if the trustee refuses our requests, then we know we have to go to court. So I want the trustee to tell me, are you going to comply with this or not? And, we'll usually give them about a week to get back to us. We don't expect them to comply within a week. They can give us the documents, anytime within the next 60 days. That's what the probate code says. But we at least want to have some confirmation back for them that either, yes, I'm going to comply, or if they come back and say, no, forget it, get out of here, I'm not giving you anything, then your next step is to go off to court. So if you're in a situation where you need financial information or you need a trust accounting, all you have to do is contact us. We'll share this letter with you. You can put it put your own name on it, put your own trust name on it, and you can get to work requesting the documents and the financial information that you're entitled to as a trust beneficiary. Albertson and Davidson is here to help you fight for your inheritance. Check out aldavlaw.com for our complete library of helpful legal videos and articles from your favorite California trust and will litigation law firm, Albertson and Davidson, LLP.